I am Chinese. Okay, I am white Chinese. I know I keep saying to people that I'm not Chinese, but it turns out if you don't like President Donald Trump, you are Chinese. And I don't like President Donald Trump, so I guess I am Chinese, and we are all Chinese. That was the argument that he tried to present last night. Now, of course, I'm joking. He didn't say you're literally Chinese if you hate me, but he did say you have been duped by the Chinese into hating me, the big, beautiful president. So that was really fun. It's like Russiagate, but somehow worse, because like obviously there was a decent amount of evidence that Russia tried to interfere and at least like engage in influence peddling in the 2016 elections. Liberals greatly overemphasized the impact of that because they were coping with Hillary's loss. But this is far worse than that because, one, there's no evidence whatsoever, not even enough evidence to suggest that there was genuine interference by the Chinese in our election. But also on top of that, Donald Trump took that to say, China is hurting my feelings personally. I'm the president. China is making everybody hate me. It's the funniest version of Russiagate that they could have designed. So much respect to the Republicans for constantly pushing the needle. Let's hear what this guy has to say.
Press last night, where he continued his campaign to cast doubt on the 2020 election he lost and the 2026 midterms he fears losing. He did it by making a series of misleading claims and citing dated intelligence that failed to demonstrate any votes were actually compromised. Senior political correspondent Rachel Scott is at the White House with the latest. Good morning, Rachel.
George, good morning to you. And Republicans on Capitol Hill were hoping the president would focus on immigration, on the economy, issues they believe will be important to voters this midterm election. But instead, the president came before the American people to talk about an election that he lost 6 years ago, using unfounded claims to demand sweeping changes ahead of the midterm. With the midterm elections just 4 months away, President Trump taking to the podium in prime time to sow doubt in America's election system, making misleading claims about the election he lost 6 years ago.
No country can be great without fair and honest elections. You have to trust your country.
In a 25-minute speech, the president making extraordinary and vague claims that officials he appointed in his first administration were part of a cover-up to keep information about foreign interference and election fraud away from him, arguing newly released documents would show efforts by China to interfere in our elections and expose flaws in the voting system.
They're vulnerable and they're easily compromised, and people within our government knew that.
But the president provided no evidence that the outcome or any votes were altered in the 2020 election.
If there was a fraud, does that mean his win was illegitimate? No, you see what you're trying to do is apply logic to the situation. And in order to understand Donald Trump, you can't do that. That's a big mistake because you think there's any logic to what Donald Trump is saying when the answer is there simply is none. Okay? That's your big problem. It's okay. Everyone makes this mistake. Everybody makes this mistake. Because it doesn't make sense that the election was stolen. The election integrity was fine in 2016 when Donald Trump won the election, even though he still complained after his victory, if you guys recall. And then Donald Trump became president, but then the election was stolen from under him while he was president. And then Joe Biden became president. But then when Joe Biden was president, he fixed the election system again so that Donald Trump could be president again. None of it makes sense because if you're the president, if you can steal the election, as Trump is claiming Biden did, while Trump was president from right under his nose, why wouldn't you steal it again? Why wouldn't you use the election theft button and slam it extra hard to make sure Donald Trump doesn't become president? You're now the president. The libtards are the president, right? The libtard party is in charge. The Chinese Communist Party is in charge. Why wouldn't they just continue doing election theft? None of it makes sense. But none of it has to make sense because, let's be real, these are not the brightest crayons that he's painting with, okay? Donald Trump isn't necessarily a very intelligent guy. And his fan base is even dumber than he is. So obviously, it doesn't have to make any logical sense whatsoever. You can't say too big to rig either, for the record. You can't say that because it was bigger last time around. Like, Donald Trump got more votes in the 2020 election than he did in 2024. So that also doesn't really make sense. Like, he got more votes, but then I guess like they rigged it even harder in 2020. So why didn't they rig it just as hard in 2024? This is an understandable question to ask, right? Now, the 275,000 non-citizens were on the voting rolls was actually an interesting one. That was probably one of the only like actionable things that he could point to. And it turns out, guys, this might come as a surprise to you, he was lying about that too. Now, he wasn't lying that there were, like names that needed to be taken off the voter rolls. He wasn't lying about that part. It turns out they weren't like non-citizens or anything. I mean, some of them might have been, but for the most part, they were just like dead people. So, a thing that happens. So that should probably come as no surprise to some of you, but I know many of you are big-time Trump fans, and you think that Trump never lies, and he's the best, and when he says something, it's obviously the most truthful thing that anyone's ever said. Did Trump get more votes in 2020 than he did in 2024? I thought he did. Oh wait, no, he got 77. Okay, no, chat was right. I was wrong.
There's also no evidence of the fraud that he said was occurring, because you have to actually vote as a non-citizen to be committing voter fraud. So
yeah, in order for, even if a non-citizen is accidentally on a voter roll, which mistakes can happen, this is why I said our elections have integrity. And the reason why I'm confident in that is because we obsess over it. It's mostly the Republicans that obsess over it, but I guess in this circumstance, it's not even fair to say it's just the Republicans that obsess over it. Obviously, like, there are a lot of commissions, bipartisan ones, that are making sure that the elections are correct and they're fair and they're free and all that stuff. But like, what's crazy is we know that non-citizens don't vote. We know that non-citizens do not vote, and yet Republicans just say it all the time. And they've said it so many times, not dissimilar to how they claim that, non-citizens are violent and responsible for the crime rates and all this stuff, that if you repeat a lie long enough, it just becomes the truth, especially if the oppositional forces in the country are not fighting back against this misinformation. And Democrats have been fairly insufficient in their response to especially the idea that, undocumented migrants are responsible for tremendous amounts of crimes in this country. That's more so just like a meta commentary on truth and not having any consensus reality and whatnot. But we just know that that's not the case, right? How do all the media keep discussing if his claims are based in good evidence instead of talking about why he's bringing up his baseless claims again in the lead up of the midterms? I think the media is aware that he's lying. They're covering it fairly. They're covering it with accuracy. It's just that right now we're kind of in a holding pattern. We're at the mercy of Donald Trump's whims. Like, if he decides to go in one direction, it's just frustrating. We don't know what could take shape in the upcoming days. I suspect that he will use the Department of Homeland Security. I believe Mark Wayne Mullen also did a press conference on like the actions he's going to be taking and things like that. Yeah, he wants to make sure that people don't go out and vote against them and against the Republican Party. So we'll see.
Democrats warning that President Trump is laying the groundwork for challenging future election results.
He's laying the foundation to be able to tell America after Election Day that the election was corrupt and therefore should not be respected.
That's the best case scenario, for the record. What we're talking about here is the best case scenario, that he's like not capable of doing something before the elections to like impede on people's rights to be able to go out and cast a fucking vote.
Good afternoon. A question from Reuters. US President Donald Trump declassified intelligence on Thursday that he maintained showed Chinese interference in US elections, despite a US intelligence assessment that found no evidence Beijing affected the 2020 vote that he lost. Does the Foreign Ministry have any comment on this, and will President Trump's comments affect bilateral relations? Thank you.
美方的有关说法纯属无中生有、恶意抹黑，早已被证明是无稽之谈。中方历来坚持不干涉内政原则，没有兴趣，也从未干涉美国大选。相反，是谁动辄干涉别国的内政， 长期无差别地监控全球各国政府、企业、普通民众，大规模地窃取他国公民的数据，国际社会看得清清楚楚。我们敦促美方反躬自省，停止无端的抹黑中国，不要在选举中拿中国说事，多做有利于中美关系的事。
Yeah, China came out and said, this is not correct. Y'all are fucked up. Also, they might as well say we love Donald Trump while they're at it, because why shouldn't they love Donald Trump? Donald Trump has been the greatest gift to Chinese soft power. Donald Trump has been the greatest president for China. In approximately 2 years of his second term, Donald Trump caused so much instability around the world and destroyed American soft power initiatives, destroyed the international design that we had not only created ourselves, were the architects of, but also were safeguarding for almost a century. Donald Trump threw that into the fire, lit the world on fire, quite literally and figuratively, and created so much instability and undermined critical allies all around the world to such a degree that now, unlike ever before, when people are polled around the world about China versus the United States of America, they prefer China to the United States of America. Incredible. I mean, that is insane. America had so much soft power. America had so much goodwill. Many might even say goodwill that it didn't deserve. And Donald Trump lit it all on fire in an alarming, record-breaking pace. This is perhaps the reason why they call Donald Trump the great nation builder for China in the People's Republic of China. That's what they know him as. So for Donald Trump to turn around and act as though, China's making everybody hate me, well, it's kind of funny. It's just like, simply put, it's the most narcissistic thing that you could possibly do, where you never look within for any blame. You never take responsibility for your actions. And you just assume that everybody hates you not because of what you've done, but, some other person made everybody hate you. It must be China. You need to run it back real quick, that last question he answered, because he was definitely not saying they love Trump law. I know they didn't say that. I'm saying they should basically say that. If they were honest, they would be saying that. Behind closed doors, they're probably like, do you fucking hear this guy? This guy thinks we haven't benefited tremendously from Trump being president. Did you hear it? He said we made the world hate him. You made the world hate you, motherfucker. What are you talking about? Like, think about this, dude. 100 years of soft power, 100 years of global hegemony, okay? And on top of that, we're talking about even a much more powerful social force, Orientalism, racism. Like, China has always been seen as like the great menace. Throughout its century of humiliation, it's an area for colonial plunder. And past that point, since its revolution, it's always been a menace. It's at times been a great and valuable ally to American foreign policy in the region to use against the other real enemy, the USSR. However, ultimately, from the perspective of the rest of the world, whether it be the Asian countries around China or whether it be countries in Europe, China has always been seen as China's always been met with suspicion. China's renewable energy revolution is fantastic, but at what cost? Like, there's a whole meta here in the Western world, in Western media specifically, that continues this suspicion against China. Suspicion that I think is unwarranted. That's my personal perspective, but suspicion that very much existed for the longest time. And there's polls to prove that. And yet, now, more people around the world favor China over the U.S., Pew Study suggests. And it's really funny because everyone knows exactly how this happened. Everyone except for Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the only person, perhaps the only person in the country, and maybe his, stupid cult, that doesn't realize that Donald Trump alone is responsible for this attitude shift. Most Americans still don't like China, and yet most Americans also don't like Donald Trump. So clearly, something doesn't add up, right? We are in the minority of American citizens that actually don't have a negative opinion of China, but also despise Donald Trump. We are literally a tiny sliver of the American population. If you look at the American population, for the most part, they're not exactly super favorable. Now, obviously, the American population's opinion on China has changed dramatically for the better as well, but we're still nowhere near where other countries are, right? So it's extra funny that he is laying the responsibility of the hatred that people have, the very real, palpable hatred that people have, Americans have, and the rest of the world has towards Donald Trump, in the hands of the People's Republic of China.
We also worked with proactive states to identify 28,000 non-citizens on their voter rolls, plus 400,000 individuals that are still registered to vote that are deceased. Now, these 23 states, they proactively worked with us on the SAVE program. That's Georgia, Ohio, Tennessee, Texas, North Carolina, Idaho, Alabama, Missouri, Louisiana, Kansas, Arkansas, Wyoming, Montana.
Wow, it kind of feels like these red states got a real problem. How the fuck do you respond to this? I don't know. You just fucking say the truth. You identify what they're saying. You identify what the problem is, and then you keep repeating the truth over and over again. At this stage, not to go back to the meta commentary here, but at this stage, like, it kind of doesn't matter. The Trump supporters are going to believe this no matter what, and they're going to believe even more far-fetched claims, as a matter of fact. And the rest of the country is going to be like, that's stupid. So the best you can hope for is like people in the margins that are maybe half paying attention to this stuff, that hear what the president says and go, wait a minute, that's crazy. And then you try to patiently explain to those guys who are not a part of the cult that that is wrong. And that's all you can do. That's all you can hope for. And you know, continue to let the material conditions wither away and create so much instability, so much chaos, so much anger and resentment that like his base gets smaller and smaller and smaller until they are in the margins. What proof would it take you to convince you that even a portion of this is legit? The last 30 years of investigations from independent commissions, right-wing think tanks, liberal think tanks, to have not conducted extensive research on the integrity of elections to show that American elections are actually pretty reliable, and there's no evidence of voter fraud beyond like margins. Like, the greatest example of this is the Heritage Foundation, right? The Heritage Foundation rolled up their sleeves and got to work. Okay, they conducted the most comprehensive study on voter integrity and election integrity and voter fraud, because obviously this is a major right-wing position, right? So in order to justify this major right-wing position, they had to go and find some evidence. So they did. Problem for them is they looked at billions of votes that were cast over 3 decades, and they found that approximately 1,200 to 1,400 instances of voter fraud had taken place. Over billions, over 3 decades of elections, local elections, state elections, presidential elections, they only found 1,400 to 1,400. I don't remember the exact number. So they disproved their own theory while they were trying to create sufficient evidence. That is the reason why an extraordinary claim, such as the one that the administration is making, require extraordinary evidence. And yet, there is no extraordinary evidence. There's not even any evidence whatsoever, which is precisely the reason why they're leaning into silly things like this. They're leaning into, whatever they can to be like, oh, well, let's cast some doubt. As NBC News also reported and explained, some of this is newly naturalized citizens that haven't been updated in the registry, and therefore Department of Homeland Security or the administration is making it seem like these newly naturalized U.S. citizens are actually non-citizens and technically are not allowed to vote when they have that. So there are numerous ways to tackle these arguments. Obviously, one of the funniest ones, the ones that I like the most, are the simple ones. The simplest way to ask this question is like, so the elections were fucking stolen under your watch, but then they weren't stolen when Biden was president? So the election integrity was compromised under the Trump administration when Trump was president, and he lost the election, but then Biden became president, and then Biden actually fixed the election integrity, so Trump won again? How does that work? Right? This is it. So the elections were rigged under Trump's watch, but then Biden fixed the election rigging, and that's how Trump won. Because that's the argument he's presenting. It makes no fucking sense. It literally makes no sense whatsoever. None of it makes sense.
Does not prove citizenship and does not give you the right to vote. You must be a U.S. citizen and you must be eligible to vote. Before and after the election, we will scrub all election records looking for illegal aliens and those who are ineligible to vote, including those that somehow voted, yet they were deceased. If you're illegal and attempted to vote, or you tried to vote illegally for someone else, we will find you and we will charge you.
Yeah, no shit, dude. That's always been the law. It's literally the same as saying, hey, if you go out and you shoot a grandmother in the face, we will find you and we will prosecute you and you will go to prison. Yeah, wow. What a revelation. Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that it was illegal to vote as a non-citizen. Of course, that's always been the case. It's just an unbelievably rare situation. It does not happen. It does not happen at all. Okay? That's the problem. That is the issue.
Yeah, so let's talk about the major networks not willing to carry the President of the United States address to the nation on election security. How shameful is that? I think it was ABC, NBC, and I don't know if CBS. Did CBS carry it? Anybody? CBS carried it. So ABC and NBC not carrying that? Why? What are they trying to cover up? Why wouldn't they want to inform the American people? Why are they calling themselves a news outlet if they're not actually trying to put the news out there? We wasn't giving spin on the election. The president wasn't trying to...
Yeah, they're just... The greatest gift that the outlets gave Trump was to not cover his stupid fucking speech, which, by the way, perfectly fair, perfectly valid for major news outlets not to carry this ridiculous fucking speech and then instead discuss how many lies he repeated on it. It also is like a win-win, I guess. It's a win for some of the major outlets, like keeping their integrity or what remains of it. And it's a major victory for the Republicans because now they have something to bitch about. It's their favorite thing. Oh my God, you guys are being so unfair. Why wouldn't you let the president lie to everyone on primetime television? Especially lie in a way that many people have been successfully criminally prosecuted over, whether it be doing January 6th, whether it be, criminally prosecuted and then released when Donald Trump became president again, unfortunately. And for Fox News, for example, there's almost $1 billion penalty sitting on the other side of that. Last time they carried Donald Trump's speech and didn't address some of the nonsense that Trump was actually entertaining and even leaned into some of that nonsense. So obviously for Fox News, they don't want to risk it again, right? Now, Sean Hannity loves Donald Trump. You guys know this. He's the #1 brown noser. And Sean Hannity came on live right after Trump's riveting speech about how the American elections were stolen, about how China had participated in this election fraud, and about how China had made everybody hate the big, beautiful president. Sean Hannity complained about CNN not running the speech and maybe gave like one statement after and immediately moved on. That's how you know That's how you know even the Republicans were not really trying to entertain this stuff. If you got Sean Hannity not covering this stuff extensively, if you got Sean Hannity not going deep into all the claims that Donald Trump made last night, obviously, even the Republican media apparatus is not very confident in the information that Trump was delivering. And of course, they're not confident because it's ridiculous. In order to avoid a potential Dominion lawsuit, Fox News even came out and literally openly stated after Trump's claims that Fox could not independently verify the statements Trump was making about the elections. They straight up added that content warning. Makes you think. Trump is running out of allies. Trump has a lot of enemies for good reason, but he's certainly running out of allies. He's at the end of his rope. This movement is dying. The MAGA movement is now propped up by some of the most insane people. And when I say insane, I know it's a term I use a lot, but I mean like literally mentally ill, maladjusted, genuinely unwell, physically unhealthy people. It's the core of this movement. It's the evangelical Christians that are chock full of white supremacist values. And even those guys are experiencing the economic shock of Trump's ridiculous militarism in the Strait of Hormuz. And even those guys are beginning to recognize that maybe Donald Trump is not fixing the prices in the way that he claimed he would. Better yet, maybe some of them are even getting frustrated because all he talks about is like transgender and liberals and all this stuff. Meanwhile, he said he was going to end these wars and he never did. And he's starting new wars. And now those wars are starting to be impactful, starting to impact their bottom line, hurting their wallets. I predict a lot of people, especially on the Republican side, are going to sit out this upcoming midterm. They're not going to go out and vote because there's nothing to vote for. Trump is not on the ballot. And there's not much to look forward to. And even the comfortable ones are not going to vote because usually the comfortable ones, well, they don't have any reason to go out and vote. Trump is not on the ballot again. He has become far too narcissistic for the average person to follow and to, show any loyalty or sympathy towards. The last people that remain, the last holdouts are going to be the most insane, the most zealot folks out there. But it's cooked. Here's the problem. If you consolidate power around a narcissistic, petty, despotic tyrant like Donald Trump, he's not going to use his lame duck period, which he's in now, to set up a comfortable future for the movement. He's going to use the consolidated power that he has on dumb shit like this. A messaging operation to try to make himself feel better, to prosecute his enemies if he has any motion, any clout that remains. He's not doing this to prop up a better future for the Republican Party because he's not a movement man. Trump has made it very clear from the start. There's only one guy he cares about. That's Donald Trump. He'll enrich his friends, his fail sons, his immediate business partners that he has like a unique relationship with now, whether they be Silicon Valley techno-feudalists or, the oil and gas industry. But even then, he'll burn them on a moment's notice. This guy burns his allies. So what makes you think that he is going to care about a broader Republican movement? He does not. He doesn't. He is the movement. And the Republicans hitched their wagon to this fucking petty tyrant like a bunch of morons. And these are the results. But of course, remember, a petty tyrant on his way out can still do a lot of damage. And he is trying to do that right now. So don't feel comfortable. It's important to understand that their incompetence is an advantage for us. But even an incompetent tyrant can still do a tremendous amount of damage.